So people who weren't able to come to this meeting will be able to watch it on the computer. So we'll post that in the next day or so. So thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Jill Drew, and I am the co-chair of the Sharon Connect Task Force, which came into being in November 2019. Seems like an ages ago, but not that long ago. I really thank you guys for coming tonight. I'd like to recognize some of the other members of the Sharon Connect Task Force that are on the call with us tonight. My co-chair, Megan Flanagan, is co-hosting this call. Also here is John Brett, Patrick Galloway, Linda Nyberg, let's see, Barbara Prindle, Brent Prindle, Beth Ribzik, Eric Simon, and a new member, Ben Newhouse. And we have a couple of other members I don't see yet, Alexandra Peters and Roger Lurie. Hopefully they'll join us in a little bit. You may know that Sharon has been attempting for 15 years to try to get help to improve connectivity in town. And after 15 years of essentially crying in the wilderness, we're now living in a time where we have the best opportunity yet to bring high-speed internet to all the homes and businesses in Sharon. It won't be easy, but it's certainly we're in a much better position than we've ever been. First, our town is doing an engineering feasibility analysis that is underway, and I'm going to update you on our progress so far with that. Comcast, which is our main cable internet provider, joined with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection to apply for a federal grant to wire the parts of Sharon that are currently not served by Comcast. That includes 240 homes and 27 miles of road. If Comcast wins the grant, it would wire this with its current coaxial cable service, not fiber optic, and it is still owned by Comcast, which some people, have issues with. But anyway, it is a formidable network that is generally reliable. Comcast says if it does win this grant, it will also wire the other 4 towns in this service area: Salisbury, North Canaan, Norfolk, and Falls Village. Next, there's a Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which was just signed into law this fall. And that sets aside $42 billion for broadband infrastructure. And of course, it depends on how the rules will be written and what happens on the ground here in the next few months. But Sharon might qualify for some of that funding. And if it did qualify, that could significantly reduce the cost of building a fiber optic network for the whole town, as local projects are only required to fund 25% of the costs of projects under this particular law, and the federal government matches 75%. When we first formed our task force, we assumed the town itself and taxpayers would have to foot 100% of the costs of building a town-owned network. And since no outside grant is a sure thing, if the town does decide to go ahead with the network, it might still have to foot all the construction costs. What we're planning is that ongoing operating costs of any network would be funded by the subscribers themselves, and the network would be managed much like our current sewer and water commission, with private company contractors operating the system under the oversight of a town commission. Meanwhile, there are private equity firms and other companies that are looking very closely at the rural fiber optic network business. There is a lot of money floating around, and so there is a potential that other companies might seek the opportunity to build out a high-speed network here. I wouldn't hold your breath, but that is a possibility, and we are aware of those possibilities in case something emerges. I would going to talk a little bit more about the feasibility analysis of a town-owned fiber optic network and how there's an interplay between that and what Comcast is thinking to do. But I just want to pause for a moment to see, Brent Colley was going to be here. He's not here yet, but I wonder if Casey, as a selectman, if you might want to just say anything, because basically our task force is a group of volunteers who are advising our Board of Selectmen on how to improve connectivity in Sharon. I don't want to put you on the spot, Casey, but just in case.
Well, Brent's here too. So
Brent's here.
Oh, Brent's here. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Okay. So Brent,
got
do you
the floor,
want to
Brent.
say anything? Okay.
I'm up on Skip Mountain. Just, proves the case, for what we need.
Yeah. Okay.
I had to travel up the hill just to be here. First and foremost, I appreciate all of you and all the effort that you put forth to, be where we're at, because, we pretty much put a full court press on the issues that we have, which is lack of broadband and cellular. And I think we're at a point where, as a town, compared to the rest of the towns in our region, that we're at the top because of the efforts of yourself, Jill and Megan, and all of you on the committee that have placed us. And I think that's great, and that proves that you can make a big effort, and you can put yourselves, in a place where, as a town, but not only just as our town, but as a region, we can succeed. And I think we've made great progress. I think as anyone listening in that's not from Sharon needs to understand, is that the providers are basically every town has a provider. If you're in Kent, it's Charter. If you're in Sharon or Salisbury, it's Comcast. If you're in Cornwall, it's Cablevision. And what we've done locally in Sharon is to put the feet to the fire and let everyone know that we need help and we need to move forward and find a solution. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And, I think with the funding that's available on all levels, from state to federal and local, we're in a good spot. So I think, tonight's meeting and the meetings that we've had up until this point are great, because, whether there's a grant, whether there's an opportunity with funding from local, federal, state, we're here. And, we have people in place that are going to help anyone who's going to provide those services to us, with people that are here to, basically communicate and to coordinate. And so that's what's great about tonight, is that we're here and, we are ready to go. They like, the terminology is, we're shovel ready, which we are. So I just want to say thank you to all on this call. You guys have provided us the help that we need as a Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, and as a town in general. And I think from here forward, we're in good shape when the opportunities present themselves.
Okay, well, thanks, Brent. We appreciate your support and all the selectmen's support in getting us this far. Casey, do you want to say anything, or are you?
Yeah, I would agree with Brent. This actually, this has been a long time coming, and this actually feels real now. Like, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's in large part because of you and Megan and your group, all the work that you've put in over the last 2 years or so. It's just it's really gotten us to a good place, and you know, hopefully this works out. But thanks to all of you for, again, helping support the Board of Selectmen in the town by gathering all this information, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the status is with the engineering firm, and finding out more tonight. That's why I'm on this call, like everybody else, to see where we're at. So thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so for those of you who haven't been following this, let me just say that the town of Sharon, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance approved as part of the budget this year to pay for an engineering feasibility analysis to see what it would take to build a town-owned fiber optic network. That analysis is, as I said, is underway and is expected to include an estimate of the cost to build the network, the annual cost to operate it, an estimate of the time it would take to build the network, and a look at what the monthly subscriber fees are going to be. After a competitive bidding process in which five firms participated, the Board of Selectmen picked a team of Surtex Broadband and Pike Telecom. Surtex is based in Connecticut, to undertake the analysis. They began in October on what's called a high-level analysis, and gathered data using GIS. You see here. Mute people here. Yeah. Okay. They used GIS maps that were provided or made available by the town's assessor's office, and they used data that our group gathered on the ground, led by Brent Prindle, where we were all driving around mapping telephone poles and trying to determine whether service was underground or overhead, which is a big cost issue when you're trying to build a network. It's a lot more expensive to underground wires than it is to do overhead wires. But anyway, Brent really knows the town's infrastructure, and we were able to at least get a running start on that part of it. Surtex and Pike are working, they're on track to deliver a full report that our task force will present to the Board of Selectmen by the end of January. That will be in time to be part of the town's upcoming budget cycle. What they've done is they've mapped out an initial path for where the network would go, and they're going to be sending engineers to Sharon on the Christmas week to confirm some of the assumptions that they made, to make sure, like boots on the ground, to make sure that they're physically possible. What they are doing is like creating sort of an initial site plan for a building plot. If residents of the town in a town meeting vote to go forward to build a fiber optic network, what would happen would be that the town would use that initial engineering analysis, kind of put that out there for all bidders. And then there would be a formal bidding process for someone to bid on that job. And while there's a lot of very detailed work that goes into this feasibility analysis, it's not a final plan. It's not like the, I guess like the architect's drawing in a house. Whoever would win the bid would have to do a more detailed engineering plan. But this still, with this level, we had to at least do this to get pretty good estimates, pretty solid estimates of the costs that would be involved for the town to even make the decision whether to go forward or not. So this is one of the things that I would say that other towns have not done yet. And that's kind of why Sharon is closer than a lot of our other towns to having a shovel-ready project, because the town found a way to put in its budget what was $30,000 to do this analysis. And it's kind of the first step for everything. So anyway, so that's almost done. And like I said, we will try to have a meeting, I think at either the end of January or the beginning of February, where we can lay out the details of all of that, all of the costs, all of the timing and everything. Our task force is meeting with Surtex and Pike at least once a week over Zoom, and actually more often now as we're getting closer to the end because they need to deliver their analysis in January. And so all of that's happening, and a lot of our time has been spent working with them and trying to get the best data and the best details we can. And at the same time, as I mentioned before, Comcast partnered with DEEP, and they've applied for a grant to finish building out Comcast's coaxial cable network. So coaxial cable is not state of the art like fiber is, but Comcast has been upgrading those cables to provide faster download and slightly more robust upload speeds. If Comcast gets this grant, it believes it could build out to our unserved areas in 1 year. And any town-owned fiber optic network, it will take a number of years to build. So that is one thing that the town is going to have to consider, is the speed and the timing. The grant that Comcast has applied for is not part of this recently passed infrastructure bill. It is part of already appropriated funding that is administered by a department of the U.S. Department of Commerce called the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. They put out a request for, they put out the grant call last summer, and these grants were supposed to be announced in November. So we thought by tonight's call, we would know whether Comcast got the grant or not. But the NTIA got so many applications from all over the country, more than I think $3 billion worth of projects for what was only allocated to be $270 million of federal funding for this program, that it has delayed its decision supposedly until January. Let's hope it's decided in January. And it's, Comcast is just one of, many, many bidders now. So we don't know if they're going to win the grant. If they don't win the grant, Comcast has said, at least its local officials who have worked with us pretty closely, have said that they would like to work with each individual town to arrange some sort of cost sharing arrangement for a build out. This path would undoubtedly be much less expensive than a whole new fiber optic network, but it would still be, a network owned by a corporate giant who will dictate the terms to its subscribers and who would be allowed to do whatever they wanted with that network. They could enforce data caps, which they tried to do earlier this year, and then they took them off. They could enforce data throttling, where if they felt like they didn't have the capacity to provide the speeds that you want, they can throttle you back. If the town works with Comcast to build out their network, the town will not have any control because Comcast will own that network. However, it would be, it's a pretty good network, and it would cost a lot less than building our own, and it would happen a lot faster. So that's kind of one of the key questions that the town itself, the taxpayers of the town, are going to have to make a decision about. And one of the things I would just say is that there's a little bit of irony here, because if Comcast does go forward and start to build out the parts of town that are unserved, it will make it more difficult for Sharon and the other towns to qualify for the new federal funding that's coming down the pike, because that federal funding, that $42 billion I'm talking about, a lot of that is targeted to rural, underserved communities. And right now, I guess one of the other things that we've done as a committee, because the maps that are being used to determine who is underserved in the federal government are really bad. We have worked, part of the reason we worked to map out our infrastructure was to have a map-based way to show that we are underserved. We are an underserved community. But if Comcast wires all those roads that they haven't wired in 15 years of asking, we're no longer considered an underserved community, and that will make it much harder to get federal funding, which means it's just an interesting interplay that we're watching, and that all of that, is going to have to come before the town to think about as sort of policy decisions. Our job as a task force is not to advocate for any particular approach. Instead, we are basically trying to research all the available options and present the pros and cons of each so that town residents have the information that you need to make a vote on any town meeting on what project the town wants to do. The majority of the residents voting in the town will want to do. This is our third community meeting we've done in the last year because we like to update people and let them know where we are. And we expect to host another community meeting in January or February. And that will be a very meaty one because that will be the one where we present all the estimates. We don't feel comfortable like really going into the numbers right now because they haven't, the Surtex and Pike haven't done their write out yet. You know, they've made some assumptions that we have some questions about. We want to go through all this with them because we want to make sure that the numbers that we're giving to people are, you know, if they're not like to the penny, at least they're in the ballpark of what we are to expect. So I just want to say one more thing, kind of turn it a little bit. So while this task force has been working on kind of this mega project, like how to connect. I mean, our goal is to connect every home and business in Sharon with high-speed internet, or at least make it possible that those homes and businesses can access it. But at the same time, as many of you know, our current residents have Comcast, or they have Frontier, or they have some other service, and it's not working well. And these companies are very difficult to reach and very hard to get your service problems addressed. So one of the other things that we've been doing, primarily Megan Flanagan has been doing it, my co-chair, is advocating for individual people who are having problems with their current service, with people at Comcast and at Frontier. And while she isn't always successful, I tell you, if you have a problem with your service, you want Megan Flanagan advocating for you because she does not give up. And so I just want to turn it over to her for a minute so that she can talk a little bit about that and how, if you are having service problems, how you can reach us so that she can try to help. So Megan.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you. Yeah, so actually last year we did release a sort of survey to report any service issues you might have with Frontier or Comcast. And I revived those forms today and I'll post them in a moment in the chat. So if anybody is currently suffering from, if you're a Comcast user and you're having some trouble and you want to report that to Comcast, they were highly responsive. And to my knowledge, everybody who did submit a problem was at least contacted and they tried to work on it. So from what I was hearing back, actually Comcast did fix everybody. Frontier, on the other hand, has not been responsive to the degree that I actually have filed a case with the Attorney General's office. And they are, what I understand is they are investigating now. So if you have a problem with Frontier, if you're looking for some support in either service, because I know most of us who do have Frontier are actually too far away from the main hut to actually get internet service. You're not really getting broadband. You're not getting any high speeds, anything that's defined as internet. You can come through me, or you can choose to fill out our service request form. Or if you're having billing issues with Frontier, which is another thing we've been hearing about, is that there is potentially some billing problems on the Frontier side. Again, feel free to either fill out the form and or reach out to me directly, and I'll see if I can help. As Jill mentioned, I'll provide my contact information. I will in just a moment post the link to those 2 service request forms. So, you know, especially with Comcast, because they are so responsive, I'm okay with just sending a list to them. So if you have someone who is outside of the town of Sharon, as long as it's Comcast, it's a little bit easier for me because they are very willing to work with us. I'm happy to just submit that service request to them as well. But I will post my contact information, a link to our website, which actually has a lot of our members' contact information in it as well. And I'll also post the 2 forms that we had done earlier this year, one for service request service review request of Frontier and service review request of Comcast. And just as sort of an aside, one of the other things that we've been working on as a committee is finding ways to get you connected. If you don't have internet at all right now, or you've been looking into hotspots, we've done a lot of research. I think quite a few of our team members have actually engaged with Starlink satellite service. and I've helped set up some Starlink satellites. So if you think that that's an avenue you want to pursue or you want to talk it through a little bit, I'm happy to do that. So just as sort of an additional, you know, immediate Band-Aid resource, I'm here.
Okay. All right, thanks so much, Megan. So I don't know, that's kind of it for the overview. We'd be happy to answer anyone's questions. So please unmute yourself, or if you know, one thing you could do, if you're here on video, you can go to raise your hand. That's in reactions. And I think there's a way to raise hand there, or just unmute yourself and fire away. Don't be shy.
Very quiet group tonight. I feel like last time we had a lot of questions.
So I'm on the committee. Hi, it's John Brett, and the one thing I'd ask you to clarify, Jill, or add on to, when you mentioned that Comcast would, you know, if they got that grant and wired the rest of the town, they would retain control. Then it would be up to them to determine prices, and you know, whatever they say would be how it would go. Can you speculate as to what a fiber network, a town-owned fiber network, might cost per month for a gig up and a gig down versus, say, what Comcast is offering? We know that Comcast can be variable. They're very good at using teaser rates to get people in the door. And then there's contracts too. But again, it looks like they're at least finally trying to do the right thing. But what would you say about what it would look like after it was all done? What a monthly rate would look like? And if that's a vague question, I apologize.
It's not vague at all, and it's a really important question. We don't have exact numbers yet, but we would not. I think there's no way to go forward without any rate for that service being. Hold on a second. I'm just going to unmute. Hey, John, can you mute?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. We could only go forward if our rate were competitive with Comcast. And the way that you determine the rate is you take the operating expenses. So basically the way that we're thinking of it is that the town, for a fiber optic network, the town would fund the construction of that network through a long-term bond issue, kind of like how we fund building roads and other long-term infrastructure projects. And the town can get a very, very low interest rate for a 30 or 40-year bond to fund the construction. But for the operating expenses, again, like sewer and water, the operating expenses that we would expect to be paid by those who subscribe to the new fiber optic network. So you mentioned, and I'd forgotten to mention, so a fiber optic network, what we're considering would be a network that would allow you to have speeds of 1 gigabit download and 1 gigabit upload. That's called symmetrical service. And it is sort of the new buzzword and really the new reality of online connectivity, because it used to be, and this is kind of what's going on with Comcast, they are updating their cable, because when they put the coax cable in the ground, when they built their network, they do have some fiber, you know, in their big trunk lines and stuff. But when they build their network to the home, they were building a network to push content to you. So that's why, you know, like Comcast can have a tier of pricing where you get 100 megabits download, which is plenty to watch movies and, you know, stream movies and all. But when you want to have a Zoom meeting and your child is doing homework where they have to upload a video as part of their homework, and you have, you know, a spreadsheet that you're working on from work, or, you know, some kind of other thing like that, or you're, you know, gaming. A lot of people game. There's a lot of uploading that goes on with that, and that our modern use of connectivity is really challenging the upload speeds of the incumbent providers who don't have fiber. So what this fiber network would do, and sort of one of the reasons why we're working so hard to see if it's at all feasible for Sharon to have this, is that a fiber network is basically, for what we can see for the next 30 years, we would be able to stay connected, kind of at the top of the rung, connected, where we would have symmetrical upload and download, and anything that some whiz kid, thinks up that makes connectivity, makes us being able to work from home and study from home and interact with our families from home, like we will be able to do that. Comcast is trying to optimize its cable to also allow more and more upload speeds, but there's a certain, at some point they will reach a level where they can't anymore. So right now, just to go back to your question, Comcast has multiple tiers of service. And if you have a very, kind of slow internet, you only pay, I don't have it in front of me, but I can look at it. You can pay like $39 a month. But if you want, you just look at their thing. But they just recently came out, you guys may remember, they sent around a marketing card that said you could get something called Extreme Pro, which was 800 megabits down and 15 megabits upload. So still pretty slow. But anyway, that's $106 a month for that tier. And if you wanted the Xfinity TV or voice service, then that would be another $90 for that. If you wanted, they can do special wiring to get you gigabit service, but it's 1.2 gigabits download and only 35 megabits upload. That's $111 a month, not including TV. And then if you actually wanted, and I don't know how they do this, but Gigabit Pro, which is 2 gigabits up and down, symmetrical, that's $300 a month. So anyway, Comcast has multiple tiers of pricing. What we are contemplating at this point is not multiple tiers of pricing. It is one price for everyone for 1 gigabit up and down, because that's what the fiber will allow. And anytime on fiber that you have multiple tiers of pricing, you kind of have an artificial, it's an artificial tier that people do that because they want to try to get people to buy in at the lower end. And a lot of people can't afford, more than $50 a month for their connectivity. And this will be more than $50 a month for 1 gig up and down. I can say that. What we're trying to do, so the other thing I guess I would just say to all of that is the secret sauce of this is something called a take rate. So if the annual operating costs are going to be spread out among all the subscribers to the service, the operating costs will go down to the extent more people subscribe to the service. So we have been looking at other towns that compete with Comcast or an incumbent cable provider to see what kind of quote take rate they get. What percentage of residents in that town will switch to what is a better network. But it's hard because what happens is when you do if we build this network, Comcast will absolutely come in with teaser rates, right? They're going to they're going to fight to keep their customers because they've got to pay for the cable plant that they've got here. So we'll have a kind of do-si-do with them probably for a couple of years to try to get subscribers. And if the higher the take rate goes, the lower those operating costs could be. And the last thing I'll say is that's another reason why it's really great to have people from the other towns around here thinking also about the network, because if Sharon can move forward on its network, it becomes much easier for other towns to kind of take the model and put it there. And then we have all of these other potential subscribers in these other towns when talking to Mike Salitro, who is the man who runs Surtax, our towns are close enough together that the expenses that we would need, that we'll need to foot for the operating costs for, you know, people to come to your house if there's a problem, people to fix the lines if the, if we have another big storm, which we will, and a line will go down, we need to send somebody out to do that. You know, all of that maintenance costs can be spread very efficiently over the 5 towns in the northwest corner if we all built the network. So if Salisbury builds a network and North Canaan builds a network and Falls Village builds a network and we do and Norfolk do, we each would have to, we wouldn't save, we could save a little bit of money, but not a lot of money on the capital expenses of building, but we would save, we would be able to bring very competitive monthly service fees to subscribers because we would have a larger base of people to pay those operating costs. So that's a long and vague answer to your question, but just to kind of describe, this is kind of one of the things that we're number crunching right now with the initial data that we're getting from this analysis.
Great answer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John.
I have a quick question. I don't know if anyone can hear me because I'm not on video. Okay, hi. With the few people who have tried Starlink, how's it working? Because our house isn't even built yet, but we're in the middle of the woods in South Ellsworth, so I'm thinking satellites might not work so well.
Yeah, so trees are a problem. I'm gonna let Patrick talk about that because Patrick lives among trees and he has Starlink.
I have Starlink, yes. You know, I mean, it's in the beta phase right now, and it's much better than what I've got. And there's no data cap at this point, but the trees are the issue.
Patrick, can you say, what do you have if you don't use Starlink? What is your other option?
Oh, I have a hotspot.
Okay.
I live on top of Swaller Hill and off a private road, and Comcast does come up the hill, but it's ridiculously expensive to bring it down the road. So I have a combination of a hotspot and Starlink. The hotspot tends to be more consistent, let's say, and it comes in at about 50 to 60 gigabytes per whatever, and the Starlink is around 150 when it's working, but it circulates. The trees are an issue, and what I'm going to try to do is raise the dish above the roof and see if that helps. But again, all the issues that Jill laid out as it relates to the robustness of fiber, you're just not going to get it from Starlink.
I mean,
Oh, Eric,
Starlink,
go ahead.
Starlink also will improve over time because a big function of Starlink's offering is how many satellites are up in the air. And the more that the sky is saturated with their satellites, the less likely you're going to miss connections and have issues where the signal goes down for a little bit. So the kind of consistency of service as well, the speed of service should improve over the next year. And I think the idea is with Starlink is they eventually want you to be able to get 100 megabits download to 150 download, which is definitely not what fiber optic would give you, but it is actually for almost anything you would be using at home, it should be sufficient. It's just, again, you have things like trees and stuff that could complicate things.
Trees
Right.
are, and if your only option is Hughes satellite net, I think it's night and day with Hughes.
Yes.
Right. So
Ridiculous.
So I would highly recommend that you don't lump the two together. The two products are not really satellite to satellite. The Starlink setup and design is so very different and much better than HughesNet. I don't ever look at HughesNet or if there's another one out there. Because the biggest problem, yes, because the biggest problem with them, besides the fact that they can't actually handle adequate service, is that they have a contract set up that is really, basically your firstborn child and, the last 10 years of your life. You can't get out of their contracts. So don't look at anything but Starlink if you're thinking about a satellite.
And the difference and the reason why Starlink is so much better than Hughes or Viasat is the Starlink satellites are much lower to the Earth. So the signal has much less time to travel. And so there's this thing called latency, how long it takes for a signal to do a kind of round trip between you and, let's say, the satellite. And the latency for Starlink is much, much lower than it is for like HughesNet. And so if you're doing a Zoom call, you could do it with Starlink. Probably you'd have a very hard time doing it with like a HughesNet.
Yeah, I would just say also, Claudia, before Alden, I'm going to get to you next, but just to kind of finish up on the Starlink, you might also, I don't know exactly where you are in South Ellsworth, but there is a tower that's kind of over there. You might check out how a hotspot with a, what is that called, Megan, where you put it on your roof and it.
There's a couple of little things. You can say little booster, yeah, the booster antenna. There's a couple of them. WeBoost is a company that it's a little expensive, but that actually is worth investing in if you're looking for better cellular service as well. It enhances your cellular signal, which would therefore enhance your hotspot if you use a hotspot. So you can check out WeBoost systems.
Yeah, but they are expensive, but it's like a Band-Aid kind of thing.
And T-Mobile
that would be great.
Sorry. And T-Mobile might be expanding in with fixed wireless, which would also be a solution eventually.
Okay, good. Because what I have now is we've just built a very small structure. I live next to Linda. I haven't met her yet, but we don't have cell service once we get inside our structure. We have T-Mobile. You walk in the building, the cell service is gone. So I might look into the WeBoost even before I get my Starlink. So great. Thank you.
You're welcome, Claudia, and thank you, Linda. We always have a joke with Linda because she says that she can only get her cell signal when she's near the cat's litter box. So yeah, we feel your pain. She feels your pain. Alden, hi.
Hi, I'm actually live in Lakeville. I live in California, but I'm in Lakeville some of the time, and with part of our farm in Sharon. But we have Starlink. I just want to add a little bit more to that. It's $99 a month. It's probably cost $1,000 or so to get it in originally. We can't really do a Zoom call. I mean, you can do a Zoom call, but you get knocked off 3 or 4 times an hour. But otherwise, for email and sort of other stuff, it's fine. It's more sort of more robust than anything we've had before. And I would agree that it's in beta, and our hope is that it's going to get better.
Oh, well, thank you for that. I would just say I have a good friend who is really worried about Starlink shooting all those satellites up there because there are stories where the night sky may change. The star being able to see the stars may very well. You may see a lot of Starlink satellites when you, in our beautiful area, when you look up to see the stars, and that, I don't know, there's no regulation, there's not enough regulation of space to stop that from happening. So anyway, there's a trade-off for all of these things. Robert.
Yes, back in March, there was a big hoopla about Governor Lamont putting into place some legislation that actually got passed as Public Act number 21159. And within that are a couple of provisions that seem to have some impact potentially on this plan. Do you have any comments? Has there been any discussion with public utilities people, or has there been any grant money that started to be made available through this Public Act?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. So when Lamont introduced the bill, when it was first introduced, there were a lot of, I think we were very hopeful. Our committee testified, and we had several people in Sharon write letters about why this was so important. What happened in the legislative sausage making, though, is that the one thing that they did that's really good for us is that they codified a ruling that the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority had made that says that the space on a utility pole that you would need to use to string a fiber optic cable on for all the aerial drops, that is what's called municipal gain. The town is allowed to use that for free. So there are I don't remember all the states, but there are a lot of states where that is not for free. So one of the big expenses for any kind of town-owned municipal network is that they have to lease all the poles that they're going to string their wire on. So one wonderful thing about that legislation is that it's now in the law that we do not have to pay to lease the poles to string our wires. There is still this thing called the make-ready process. Both Frontier and Eversource jointly own all of the utility poles in Sharon. I mean, Frontier owns some and Eversource owns some. So whether it's us as a town or it's Comcast, if they want to string new wire on these poles, the first thing you have to do is make a pole application to the owner of the pole. And then they have, I think, something like 90 days before they have to respond to your pole application. And then once they respond, they have basically an unlimited amount of time to send their engineers out and determine if the pole is ready for new wiring. Like sometimes they have to move things around, or sometimes they determine there's so much on a pole that you can't put a new wire on there, and then they have to bring a new pole. That make-ready process is still other towns, like we've talked to a lot of towns in Massachusetts that have done their own networks. That could be a nightmare. That could take a long time to get that done. I think that Governor Lamont is aware of that, and there are actions that are being taken to try to move that along, to basically not allow Frontier and Eversource to delay. But anyway, so that's one aspect of the legislation that has been helpful to us. In terms of the others, one big part of that legislation is that the state of Connecticut is going to do its own mapping of every region to determine who are the underserved regions. And that's going to be good for most towns because, as I said before, one of the big hurdles has always been is that there are the maps that the federal government uses to determine underserved communities are flawed. And everybody recognizes they're flawed, but there are no new maps yet, although that is something that the FCC is working very diligently on, but it's going to take a while. But basically, the way the maps are done now, if one town in a census, one house in a census block is served by high-speed internet, the mapping, the FCC assumes that the entire census block is served by the high-speed internet. Now we know, like Ben lives on Butter Road. There's a house on Butter Road, like on the corner, that has service, and then but nobody else near Butter Road has it. But that census block is considered to be served. So go ahead, Eric.
Continue, sorry.
Anyway, so I was going to say is that's another aspect of the bill that will be good. We in Sharon kind of have already done our own mapping. Like we can already show who has high-speed wired connection and who doesn't. So that's not going to help us so much, but that's a general, Bennett step forward. In terms of the grants coming through there yet, no, nothing yet. We're keeping our eyes out. We're in touch with Brent Colley is been in touch with, I've been in touch, Megan has, with the guy named, he's the Consumer Counsel. He's in the Office of Consumer Counsel.
Bert Cohen.
Bert Cohen, he's fabulous. So he lets us know when things are happening on that level. And so we're in close touch with him. And he's a big advocate of trying to get, high-speed internet to our unserved areas. Eric, yeah, go ahead.
But Joe is making a good point about what the mapping says. If you looked at the FCC, they would say like 91% or something of Sharon has internet service, and like, not just Frontier DSL service, but, Comcast service. But we know from our own survey we did that about probably, say 40% to a third of the town doesn't have access. And it's just for the exact same reason Joe was saying, is that the mapping's so bad that you have one census block that could have like 20 homes, and 3 of those homes are getting service. Everyone else would be considered to be getting service.
So just to clarify, it sounds like the Connecticut Public Act will actually have provide for mapping that is more satisfactory.
That's what their hope is, yes.
And this
And
is,
And I think DEEP is basically in charge of that. So we have this time where, there are regulations that are being written to carry out the what has been passed. But right now that's still in the now regulatory rule writing phase.
and it also sounds like much of this is lagging behind the initiatives that your task force has been doing. Any major disappointments in the related to that bill, or really any of the other processes that have been going on over the last 6 months?
Well, I guess what I would say, and it's like I'm putting it out of my head, so somebody tell me if I'm doing something wrong, but or if I'm saying something wrong. But the Lamont bill, when it was initially introduced, was a big boost for municipally owned high-speed service. And there was a requirement in there, right, that everybody in the state had to be served by something like 100 megabit up and down symmetrical. And that was huge because Comcast can't deliver that. The cable providers can't deliver that. And, maybe that wasn't the governor's intention when the bill was released, but that was the effect of it. And that meant, there would be major changes in Connecticut, but that got taken out. That provision got taken out. And I can't remember now what it is, but it's good questions. I could, if you really care about it, I can look back at my notes at that time, because there were a lot of good things
That's
in
fine.
the initial bill that, yeah. So I guess also to your point, Robert, I feel strongly, and maybe somebody else, other people on the task force can talk about this. We as a town need to keep moving forward. We can't wait for the federal government to decide how it's going to write these regs. We can't wait for the state to do our own, to do their own mapping. We can't wait for Comcast to decide what it feels like doing yesterday. We have to take this into our own hands and at least have a vote on whether we want to do this ourselves, because we're a wealthy town. We have the resources in the town to do this. We have a higher poverty rate than most towns of our makeup in the state. We have people in this town who are not getting the service that they should be getting. If we think about this like, electricity, or we think about this, like those kind of basic services, the town has an opportunity to do something here that will serve everybody. And we are running full speed ahead to try to find a way to make that happen. And whether it is Comcast, or whether it's a town-owned network, or whether it's somebody else who comes in from out of the blue, we want to fight to get the best for the most people in Sharon. So, I mean, I feel a little strongly about that, but I don't know if but so anyway, I would just say, I don't think we should wait for the regulators and the politicians to bail us out, because it's also like Sharon doesn't really qualify, for example, under, I don't understand this entirely, but under USDA regulations, I don't think we're really considered rural. So there are a lot of federal grants that Sharon might get that it doesn't really qualify for, because there are all these definitions of things. And it could very well be that Sharon is not going to fit in the definitions of however the regulators write the rules. So let's just figure out how much the thing is going to cost, figure out how long it's going to take, and figure out whether we want it or not. So.
Right. Well said, Jill. And I would also add to that, I think that the fact that we aren't giving up, no matter what, Comcast will call me and say, oh, but we're working on this, we're looking at this. And I'm like, well, until you do something, we're going to keep going, because the more we're moving forward, the more everybody's paying attention and realizing that we're not just going to sit around and wait, that we have to figure this out. So this is a problem until everybody's connected, in my opinion.
I just want to say one thing I was thinking about. One of the reasons why it's hard to connect people in Sharon and in some of the other towns is that because we're so spread out, and because we have a lot of difficult, like ledge and things like that, it is really expensive to especially build underground around here. And to build underground network, and I think, Brent, you can correct me, it's something like Sharon has 12 or 13 miles of road where all of the utilities are underground. That's like 4 times the cost of every mile aerial. So the more underground utilities you have, the cost goes up by like 4 times to build out to those. Am I right, Brent, in that?
Yeah, yes, you're right.
Okay. So that's at some level you say this is not economic to do, right? But we're still trying. We're still trying to see if it could be economic to do. Because if it were easy, it would already be built. You can take towns like Hartford, they may have 4 different providers, and there are 4 different providers, all of whom are overbuilding over each other because they're very dense. It's not that hard to build the network in a place like that. And there are private companies that feel they could get a lot of money from subscribers. We are left behind. We are not economic really for anybody without grants, unless we take this into our own hands. Just because of, even though we're, fabulous people and all of that, we're very spread out. We're an older demographic, they're looking for young gamers who will use a lot of data. We have hills and trees and rocks and all these things that make it hard to provide a service. But I don't know, I guess I just say, I'm really looking forward to what we find out in January. Hopefully in January, we'll find out whether Comcast gets the grant, and we will definitely have, our analysis done, and we can decide whether, how we're, and then it's up to the Board of Selectmen to make all the tough decisions and bring it to, the Board of Finance and the town meeting.
Actually, just to follow up on the question of if Comcast gets the grant,
yeah,
what approval does the town need to provide for them to, in other words, is there anything keeping them from just going ahead and doing it?
I don't think so.
No.
There might be some, if they had to build or something, they might need a permit to dig, but
But essentially,
if they got the grant and they didn't want the town to contribute anything to it, then I think they can just go ahead as a private company.
Yeah.
Provide service. Yeah.
Correct. They would just, and they're prepared to just go right ahead and start building. Mhm.
Although,
So-
I say, but they do want contribution on the part of the town. They say they want to work with the town. So I do think they want some sort of
Yes.
contribution. You know, those of you who've tried to get Comcast, if you don't have it, you know, they'll charge you $20,000 to run a cable to your house from the road. And then you have the privilege of paying them, you know, for the service and they own it all. So that it is not inexpensive for them to do this, but so the only thing the town, so let's say Comcast, if they get the grant, they won't need any contribution from the town. If they don't get the grant, then there would be some negotiation that could happen.
I guess I'm just, the question is, if they get the grant and move forward, would that make the other efforts moot? Or would you continue as a task force to continue looking into the fiber optic, the municipally owned options?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be moot because we would want to, I don't know that we would, we will take it to the end. We will take this to a town vote. Does the town want to do this, regardless of what Comcast is doing? So that's going to happen. And then regardless of how that vote goes, there are other things the task force is concerned about. One is, you know, cell service in town. So we could move forward in looking at that. And the other is affordability. And we will definitely work hard to stay in touch with how we can make any service that's provided here affordable for all of our residents. Yeah, Katie.
This is Kitty. I'm from Salisbury and I have no property in Sharon, but it seems to me if Comcast gets the grant, they are going to have to go through the poll application that was described earlier in this meeting. And if the whole poll application goes incredibly slowly, Comcast can sort of, because they've managed to avoid doing the right thing for 15 or 20 years, the poll application may just grind them to a complete halt. So is there a way for either you or Maria Horn or someone to monitor if they get the grant, the time during which they'll have to perform this? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think, you know, they already said Comcast already said in its grant proposal that the one thing, you're right, Kitty, it can't control is the poll, the make ready process. Now, my understanding is that there is something called temporary attachment. So if a company is willing to spend extra money, they can make an application to put their wires on the pole. They have to wait 90 days for Comcast, for Eversource and Frontier to answer them. And then they apply for a temporary attachment, and they could attach all the wires. If I don't know exactly what, I have to learn more about what that temporary process, what approval process it is. But my understanding is they could get a temporary attachment agreement in a week. Then they could put up all their wires. And then as the make ready process goes on, they may be, Eversource may tell them, you have to move your wires off of these 10 poles and rearrange them and all of that stuff. But in terms of, I guess, holding their feet to the fire to do what they promised to do, I'm assuming that Representative Horn will definitely do that. And of course, all of us in the towns who care about this will do that as well.
One thing is on the polls, we would have the same issue that Comcast would have. And another reason why Comcast might be working with greater alacrity now is that they see what we're doing and they see what else is happening in Connecticut and especially in Massachusetts. And they don't like the idea of towns building their own municipal broadband networks because they see that as an existential threat to their business. And so that's something that didn't exist. That threat didn't exist, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even a couple of years ago. And so they now have probably more motivation to build something and build it quickly, because the worst thing they would want is Sharon and then a bunch of other towns deciding to build their own network.
Right. And then just also, I would add that I've gotten, actually, that's another little advocacy piece I've been working on. I've helped quite a few homeowners, not in Sharon, actually, one family in Sharon, but in Norfolk mostly, with the pole licensing applications, because that is, you're right, Kitty, that is kind of a spot where it gets stuck. I have a pretty good understanding of what's going on there now. They do communicate in a group system. Eversource, Frontier, and Comcast can all talk to each other in a group system. Part of the problem, the biggest part of the problem, seems to be that everybody is still mailing checks. So a check gets mailed to whoever the provider is to hang, right? So this is right, nobody does that anymore. So I would say that you're right, there is going to be some delays with the pole licensing, pole applications, but given that Comcast has been sort of reviewing and studying our area, and if we went with fiber, you know, a Surtex or whoever ends up with the overall bid, they're doing a group application. So they're gonna have to apply for each pole, but presumably it's one check and we're not chasing down 50, and you know, you can sort of follow that path. I have found that just as a resident of Sharon, when I just send an angry email to every one of them, they start moving. So quite honestly, I think it's just a matter of, you know, foot on the gas and fire under them. And it really, as long as you stay on top of it, it does move a lot quicker. So you can see a lot of motion as long as again, just as long as you're paying attention and you're watching their process. I think it shouldn't be as painful. It is ridiculous. And I'm sure that Rep. Horn can help us with that too. But I do think that as long as if you just write an angry email to everybody, they all start to scramble.
I'm mindful that it's 10 after 7 and we've been on for a little over an hour. Be happy to answer any other questions that anybody has, or we can sign off and wish you very happy holidays, and that we will be back with more information in January or early February. All right. Well, seeing none, motion to adjourn. Thanks, everybody. For coming. All right. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Night, Jill. Good night, Megan.